Hello, and welcome back to Draft League content. I am Orucs-Oraihc, and I've joined a new Draft League. This one, I've made sure I have the time for. It's not on cart, so it's just going to be all the battles on Showdown, which will make it a lot less time intensive, basically. So no matter what happens, I will be able to get through the league, essentially. One way or the other. So this is the WSS Draft League. Basically, I am one of 8 coaches here. We each drafted 11 Pokemon from a list from various different tiers. And this video here is going to be just to kind of explain what my general, how the draft went, essentially, for my team, and how my how my team looks, as it were. So, without further ado, let's just get straight into it. So, my first pick in the draft was from the S tier, and I took Indeedee Female. I was the fifth round. I was the 5th pick in the draft, and it's a snake draft, which meant I was the 4th on the way back. But basically, Indeedee is, for those who aren't familiar with VGC, Indeedee is a kind of core support Pokemon. It's almost always going to be running some sort of a support role. It often runs the Psychic Seed with its Psychic Surge ability, but it can also run other items such as a Focus Sash. It can run a Colbur Berry, a Citrus Berry even, or a Pinch Berry. Usually it'll be running one of those kind of defensive items because it wants to be running Follow Me and Helping Hand, as 2 of its moves are fairly common. Expanding Force is good so it can still do some damage. And then Protect is good if you want to read targeting into it from the Follow Me. Basically, it gets very bulky. You can run very defensive sets like this with max HP, max defense is not too unreasonable. And here, I'll just put the other 4 in special defense or speed or even special attack just to do a little bit more damage with expanding forces. You can also run Indeedee Female a bit more offensively, although it's not got the greatest special attack stat. Normally Indeedee Male is going to be the more offensively oriented Indeedee, but Indeedee Female can definitely run a Choice Specs or a Life Orb set with Expanding Force and with max speed if the situation calls for it. But really, it's just a really good Follow Me support Pokemon. Which brings me to my second pick of the draft, which was Togekiss. Togekiss can also be a very support-oriented Pokemon, but it can also be offensive, and both sets have been very common in various different times in non-restricted formats, which this draft is. There's no restricted Pokemon. So, Togekiss, in fact, there's no legendaries at all in this draft. So, it's very similar to some of the earliest formats of Sword and Shield VGC. Togekiss can run a defensive set, but another pretty common set it can run, especially considering I already have a Follow Me supporter in Indeedee. Another common set it can run is a Super Luck Crit Kiss set. And basically, the idea of Crit Kiss is you just you deal a lot of damage, as it were. You get Super Luck, which raises your crit ratio. You get a Scope Lens that does the same. And between the 2 of them, you are critting half of your moves, which is very strong. It's really good at just getting rid of defensive threats that are using Iron Defense or Amnesia or other setup moves to raise their special defense. It can just break through all of that with a crit, and it crits half of the time. So It's very good, and it's got a great a phenomenal special attack stat, 120. Its stats all around are very good, really. You can run it with a timid nature. You can run it with a modest nature if you don't need the speed, but you want more offense. It's a relatively flexible Pokemon, all things considered, because you can run. Usually, the set is going to be Air/Dazzling Gleam, Flamethrower, Heat Wave to deal with Steel types. You can also run Ancient Power. You can run Aura Sphere if you want. Extrasensory is never a bad move. There's all sorts of stuff that you can kind of mess around with the Togekiss, and that's always nice. In a Pokemon, Psychic is a pretty good move, all things considered. Shadow Ball if the situation calls for it. It has a lot of good coverage. So you can run Moonblast over Dazzling Gleam, I think. Can you? Maybe not. Ah, well. In any case, Togekiss is just a phenomenal Pokemon, and it's great to have this as my second draft pick. It was really quite incredible that I was able to snag it still. The person who was drafting right after me commented in the chat, like, hey, I was going to draft Togekiss, I'm sad now. So I'm very glad that I got this. It's just super flexible. So my next pick, we had 4 free agent picks that we had 250 points total to spend on. A tiers cost 100, B tiers cost 75, etc., etc. Down to D tiers costing 25. So I decided with my first free agent pick to draft a second A tier, and that A tier is Porygon. Porygon is a Trick Room Pokemon. It's very defensive. It can run, like, this kind of a spread is fairly common with 100 plus and 156 just for even defenses. And max HP, it just, with the Eviolite, this bulk is practically unmatched. Like, legitimately, it's one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the format. Especially because it only has one weakness to the fighting type. That really helps it out a lot in terms of the bulk. And it's not shabby in special attack either. You can run this thing offensively. Most people don't because that's not what it's for, but I have got some stuff that I can do with it. But with Trick Room and Recover especially, Recover really just means that your opponent is not going to take out this thing without, like, double targeting at the very least, or having a super strong fighting type move. Sorry. All 3 of this thing's abilities can be good. Download is usually the one you go with, because if your opponent is running physically defensive sets, then you can just get a free special attack boost. So, for example, I have a decent number of physical threats on my team in the lower tiers. If my opponent is really prepping for those and expecting those to come out more, or if my opponent is just running Pokemon that have naturally lower physical defense, or naturally lower special defense than their physical defense, then Download can be really good. Trace is good to just copy an ability if I think that's going to be useful, or just to figure out an ability of the opponent. And Analytic is good because this thing is in a really middle of the pack speed tier at base 60, so if my opponent is running a fast mode, then it's going to go after them in outside of Trick Room. If my opponent is running a slow mode, it's going to be going after them in Trick Room, so it's just very often going to get the power boost from Analytic. It gets Bolt Beam coverage, it also gets Tri-Attack Shadow Ball, you can run Discharge if you're feeling bold, Blizzard. Icy Wind support is a thing. It gets a lot of good moves to run. Common set has been in the past to run Eerie Impulse, so that is an option as well. Ally Switch, of course, is always a possibility. It's something that always has to be looked out for, so I really like what Porygon can do for my team. Not quite as much as what I like Liepard can do for my team. Liepard is one of my favorite Pokemon to use in draft, and it was my next pick, my fourth pick from the B tier. So, Liepard is a prankster Pokemon, but it's not only a prankster Pokemon. So, although it is a really good prankster Pokemon, it gets Thunder Wave, it gets Taunt, it gets dual weathers with its Rain Dance and its Sunny Day. Sunny Day is there, Rain Dance is there. It gets Screech, it gets all sorts of other good moves. I think it gets Fake Tears. Torment is not bad against Choice Mons. Copycat is a fairly standard move. It's just like, oh, you can Copycat with the Trick Room. Yay. And that's always annoying to deal with. Charm, all sorts of stuff that you can use. Very annoying Prankstermon to deal with, but it's not only a Prankstermon, and it can't only be a Prankstermon on this team because I have a Psychic Surge Pokemon as my S tier. So, considering I'm bringing Indeedee probably to most of my matches, I need some way to actually use Liepard in its support fashion. Naturally, Fake Out and Foul Play. This thing does not have the greatest offensive stats, like 88 attack and special attack are decent, but not exactly great numbers. But the other thing that Liepard can do, other than being Prankster, is being Unburden. And Unburden with maybe a Psychic Seed can be really powerful with Indeedee, because then that just straight up doubles its speed. It hits 346 stat, which is going to outspeed everything. Like, that outspeeds Regieleki, I'm pretty certain. It outspeeds Chlorophyll Venusaur. It outspeeds almost anything that gets a speed boosting ability, unless it's also like at +1 or +2. So it's still going to be going first. It can also hit dark types. It can also work in psychic terrain, so that's something that's important to note. Yeah, this thing just gets really good moves, really good abilities. Its bulk is not good. I'm just gonna say it straight up. It's not good bulk, but it works. It works. And I like it, so I can't complain. It's flexible again. It's something that I can use with just about anything. It's useful. Next up, we've got Hitmontop. Hitmontop is just a great Intimidator. I wanted to make sure I drafted an Intimidator because I have not drafted an Intimidator in what feels like an age. And Intimidate is just a super good ability to have on your team, just neutralizing physical attackers in a sense. It's really great to get those just kind of weakened, survive more hits, etc. kind of a thing. Hitmontop is really a bulky support mon again, but it can also run some attacks. Like close combat is pretty common. It gets Fake Out, of course, which is really good support. Mach Punch can be used in a couple different ways. It's good to have priority in a sense, but sometimes it's also good to just do other support stuff. Coaching is good. Just running Detect is always nice. You can run a couple of other things. Focus Sash with Endeavor might be a thing. Helping Hand is always nice. You can always run Rock Slide or Stone Edge. Sucker Punch is an option. Triple Axle is an option. If you want to go with a Technician set, there's all sorts of stuff that it can use here. It has basically a lot of options. Feint is good. Wide Guard and Quick Guard are both very good. Just in terms of what they do for the teams. So, yeah, having access to Wide Guard and Quick Guard really makes Hitmontop stand out as a support Pokemon because it can neutralize a lot of different threats that way. Like, it can stop slower Fake Outs than it can stop any spread move, which is really nice against certain teams and certain Pokemon. It is just a really defensively built Pokemon. Like, you can run an Assault Vest set that's just got insane special bulk. And its Intimidate gives it good physical bulk regardless of how much you invest in it. This set here is basically it's essentially, with Intimidate factored in, this is even defenses for a spread. So that's why I've got this spread in the sample set that I've got here. But Hitmontop is just super good. It's super nice to have. So next up we have Copperajah. Copperajah is my favorite Pokemon to use in a Draft League format, or in almost any VGC format. It's just so nice. It's a fun Pokemon to use. I've got a Life Orb Sheer Force set. I've also run all sorts of other sets. If you've seen any of my other Draft League content on the channel, then you will know that I have run just about everything that can be run on a Copperajah. And or a Q-Fant if you've watched my Little Cup VGC draft. Basically, Copperajah is very bulky in that it has 122 base HP. Its defenses are not great, but it has such a huge HP pool that doesn't matter, and you can invest a lot more in defense if you want that. But it's also super strong and super slow. It's your standard kind of Trick Room Mon, and with Sheer Force Life Orb boosts, it's just doing a ton of damage. That's basically a 1.7 times power boost to any of these moves. Iron Head, Rock Slide, Play Rough. It gets all sorts of other moves that benefit, like Body Slam. It gets Bulldoze, although that's not always as useful. It's still about the same as Earthquake in power, and it doesn't take Life Orb Recoil, so you've got all sorts of other moves here that are useful. High Horsepower is another good ground type move if you just want a stronger one. But Heat Crash and Heavy Slam are another interesting thing to keep note of, because this thing also gets Heavy Metal. And with Heavy Metal, Copperajah actually weighs 1.7 metric tons, which is heavier than any other Pokemon, period. So Heat Crash and Heavy Slam with Heavy Metal are hitting almost every Pokemon that's not a legendary Pokemon. I think the only other things to note that aren't, like, again, literally legendaries that don't get hit for 120 BP for Heavy Slam and Heat Crash are like Hippowdon, Mudsdale, maybe Ferrothorn, but Ferrothorn is getting hit 4 times effective by Heat Crash regardless. What was this move? This was Rock Slide in the sample set. But yeah, just max attack, good HP or defense. Copperajah with Sheer Force, Life Orb, or with Heavy Metal, and those moves is just going to be nigh unstoppable if it gets in Trick Room properly. So after that, I was looking through and I realized I didn't have a Fire type yet. And last draft, or maybe 2 drafts ago that I did, I had a whole video where I was up against a Pharaoh Seed, and that thing had the potential to be disgusting if it got brought. Like, I lost every single prep match I had against Pharaoh Seed, just about. And if you want to check that out, just look through my channel, because there's no way I remember to put that link in the description. But Chandelure is just something that I drafted to be like, hey, I actually have a Fire type. That's going to be important. It's also a Ghost type, which helps against the fact that I had, at this point, 3 fighting weaknesses: Copperajah, Liepard, and Porygon. So Chandelure can switch into those fighting type attacks for free, and it has Psychic access to deal with the fighting types. Flamethrower, Shadow Ball, it gets Heat Wave, it gets Overheat, it gets Dark Pulse, Energy Ball. It has a ton of moves just to use. It's also a Trick Room Imprisoner, which can be very useful. It can taunt, it can Will-O-Wisp, it can set Trick Room itself, of course. My favorite set on Chandelure has got to be the Choice Scarf, because it's only base 80 speed, which is not great, not bad, but not great. It's a lot better in draft, though, and it's base 145 special attack stat. My goodness, like, that is a beautiful special attack stat. It's the highest special attack stat of any non-legendary Pokemon, tied, I think, with Alakazam, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken, but it's just a super high stat. There's nothing else that really compares to it, and it's just super strong, which is really nice. Moving on from that, we get to Palossand, and after that, of course, Excelgor. Palossand on its own is pretty decent. It has good defenses, good HP. It's a strong special attacker in Trick Room. Gets a good move pool. Shore Up is really useful in a lot of cases. It gets a lot of good coverage. Ancient Power, Energy Ball, Giga Drain, Sludge Bomb, etc. It gets Brine if you really want to run a water type move. What really makes it stand out is its ability Water Compaction, and that's the reason I bring up Excelgor with it, because the normal set you're going to be running is Weakness Policy with Water Compaction. And now, of course, it's a Trick Room monster. It's going to be running max special attack, max HP, or max one of its defenses, or a mixed defense set. It really depends. A lot of the times you'll see like very heavily specially defense invested Palossand, just because it's going to be boosting its defense a lot regardless. So its HP stat isn't going to matter as much. But you can see Excelgor really makes Palossand what it is, which is a threat. With Water Shuriken, it is a priority move that hits 2 to 5 times. It's got something like a 5 in 8 chance of hitting 3 or more times. And if you use that in the side to your Palossand is taking hardly any damage. And if it gets 3 hits, your Palossand is getting to +6 defense, and it's going to activate the Weakness Policy. That's going to put it at +2 attack and special attack. And Excelgor can threaten on its own with Final Gambit. It always has that ability to do that. Its third best attack stat. Its third best stat after its speed and its special attack is surprisingly its HP. At base 80, that's actually quite good. And Final Gambit can just straight up take out a mon that's not invested in HP. Normally, you're going to be wanting to run like literally minimum special attack. Although, as a fun fact, if you choose to go with 4 or 5 in your Ivy instead, then you actually do the same amount of damage to Palossand, but you have just a slightly higher stat for everything else that you want to use it on. So that's my little Excelgor Palossand tip. And of course, that'll depend on what spread your Palossand is, but that's going to be a surprise tool that helps us later. I think it's this specific set that you want 4 here on. Regardless, Yawn is a really good move to have, just because you're going so fast, you're going to threaten things and force them to switch out if they don't want to fall asleep. Any of these abilities is good. Hydration, Sticky Hold, Unburden are all decent. You can run a Hydration Rest set, although it also gets Recover. And you can run this thing just as an offensive threat on its own because of its high speed and its high special attack. It outspeeds Pokemon like Dragapult. So, yeah. It's a very big threat, in a sense. If it doesn't want to run this kind of a support set, it can run Bug Buzz, it can run Energy Ball, it has Focus Blast, Giga Drain, etc. It has all sorts of good moves that you can use. And yeah, it's just really powerful. Next up, we have my D tier picks. These were the final 2 picks of the draft for me. We have Emolga. Emolga is not a great Pokemon by any means. I'm going to be the first to admit it. And I have had friends who have espoused about how much they really dislike Emolga, how much Emolga just really sucks in VGC. But I think in Draft League, it actually does have some decent uses, because it's a good fast tier for a Draft League. At base 103, it's outspeeding base hundreds, especially with this kind of a format where we don't have restricted legendaries. It's very good. It outspeeds things. It has Electro Web, Nuzzle. It gets Helping Hand. It has a couple of other good moves. Like, I'm just going to say it straight up. Discharge is a valid form of speed control, and you can at me on that one. That's just my personal opinion. If you want to use Discharge as speed control, you absolutely can with a ground type next to you, or a Volt Absorb, or other similar ability mon. It gets Light Screen. I don't think it gets Reflect, but it gets Roost Access if you want to have it trying to be bulkier, even though it's not got exactly any good bulk, 55, 60, 60. It can be a little bit offensive. It's got base 75 in its attacks, but really it's a good support Pokemon more than anything else. You can run Static on it if you want to mess up your opponents, or you can run Motor Drive if you want to actually try to do something with this Pokemon, or if you just are afraid of an opposing electric type. All sorts of options with Emolga. And that brings me to my final pick of the draft, which I know at least one friend hates me for, and that is Seeking. Seeking is not as bad as you think it is, Scarlet. I swear to God. It's not that bad. Like, seriously. Especially in a draft league. I get that it's so horrible in normal VGC, but in a draft league, I stand by the fact that it is a good Pokemon. Swift Swim is a great ability. And Lightning Rod is a great ability as well. So there's a couple of different options for how I want to play this. I can run Rain Dance on Liepard. I can just run this Dynamaxing and using Waterfall, and that way to boost its speed. I can run this thing next to Emolga or Porygon that is discharging with a special set, which is probably the worst way you can possibly use a Seeking. But it's an option that I have, and in Draft League, any option is a good option, because it forces your opponent to think about that option. And if you come up with an option that your opponent hasn't prepared for, then you're already on the upper hand. So Assault Vest just gives this thing some decent bulk to talk about. But it can also run other items. It can run a Citrus Berry. It can run a Resist Berry like a Rindo. And really, this thing, like, again, its stats are nothing great to speak of. It's 92, 68 in the attack and the speed. But with Swift Swim, it can be decent. It gets access to a flying type move. I think that might only be Peck, but it can use Max Airstream. Oh, it also gets Bounce, which is significantly better. But I was right that it got Peck. Anyways, it does have a decent amount of coverage. And in the rain, it's going to be hitting hard with its water-type attacks anyways, in Swift Swim. So, just, it's a Pokemon, I swear. Don't be mad at me, Scarlet. And without further ado, that's been my draft. Thank you for watching, and I hope that this has like kind of been a kind of primer of what to expect from my team. And I'm really excited for this season of the WSS Draft League, this inaugural season. I will see you in my first team builder video, which I am literally going to record as soon as I hit the stop recording button. Until then, bye!